Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for waiting until we got started here. And so welcome to the last SBU of 2021. I was like, what year is this? Of 2021, Planning for Your Life, Your Financial Future. We're really excited about this topic. It's such an important topic, and we're very excited about the panelists that are going to be sharing information this evening. Many of you already know a lot of the panelists. Dr. Timothy Brei, we are so happy that he's the medical director of the Spina Bifida Association, and he is in Neurodevelopmental Pediatrics at Seattle Children's in Washington. And Julie Yindra, who is the Director of Student Access Services and Adjunct Instructor of Specialized Programs in Education at Hofstra University. And she was just explaining that they're in the middle of exams. So thank you for doing this in the middle of exams. And Libby Powers, who is Research Assistant at the Human Engineering Research Laboratories in Pennsylvania, and who is the reason why we were able to make contact with Maria Smith, who's the Director of Education and Outreach at Achieve a Family Trust in Pennsylvania. So lots of great information tonight. So please start thinking about the questions that you're going to want to ask. And it's 2021. So at this point, I'm thinking that most people have used Zoom or something like it. If not, I'm happy to help. But basically, in your Zoom panels, you should be able to see some kind of a chat or question box. So please go ahead and send your questions in through the chat box. I'll be, watching it all evening. You can also save them for the end of the evening, but feel free to send it earlier. So without further ado, let's get started. And first, we're going to have a conversation about living with spina bifida and our financial future. And we would like to have Dr. Brei get us started with that conversation.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to thank everybody for attending this. Good afternoon, good evening. It's afternoon here in Seattle. And I guess I'm kicking this off as potentially the oldest of the panelists or people participating. And I want to say that I did not form this very well in my brain today, but I think the issue is that when I was growing up, nobody knew how long people with spina bifida could live. And now that I'm old and gray and contemplating at some point retirement, I realize that all of you who are out there really are living with spina bifida and should have the expectation that you're going to be living into adulthood, through adulthood, potentially to retirement ages. And one of the challenges I think not just you, but many of us face is beginning to think proactively about our financial future and what our finances are so that we can optimize everything about who we are, what we like, what we want to do moving forward. I will say that although I grew up in a time frame where we didn't know how long people were with spina bifida were living, I obviously was in college and then in medical school and then in other things. So my financial future was not so much was I going to live into adulthood and need finances, but how long could I actually do my career? And would I need resources related to what we would call early retirement or disability, income, or whatever it might be. And I think so many people with spina bifida focus on the day-to-day because there's so many aspects related to spina bifida that are challenging and confusing. But we cannot forget about the fact that we are living into adulthood and that we need to plan our finances to the best extent we can for that future that we want. So I think that encompasses what I was going to say.
So, Tim, you may actually, in fact, be the oldest of the panelists, but I got to tell you, not by much. Okay, I am. Look, see there, I'm following right behind. I too am starting to think about retiring, and I think the first thing that I want to, as I look at Libby here as one of our panelists, I wish that there was a Tim Brei and a SBA in my life when I was Libby's age, saying to me when I was Libby's age, start planning for your future, because I didn't really put a lot of time and effort into thinking about what my future was going to be. My parents sort of instilled in me certain things. I knew that I was headed to college and that I, was likely going to have some kind of career in academia. And I knew that my parents' goals for me included working. But beyond that, I sort of, Tim used a phrase that sort of resonated also with me, which was, we're busy getting through the day. And the other thing that I know about lots of folks with spina bifida, myself included, is another issue that we have is many of us have really poor what we call executive function, which is that sort of like organizational voice in the back of your head that says, remember about tomorrow, and the next day after that, and the next day after that, and the next day after that. That voice doesn't work very well for many of us. And so we tend to live in the moment. So I want everyone to understand that whether you are 18 or 19 or 30 or 35, you're going to be 59 like me. And you should start thinking about what you want that to look like right now, right? Financial planning is a big piece, and that's where we're going to focus, and Maria is going to help us with a lot of the particulars of that aspect of planning. But we have to realize, I'm going to outlive my parents, right? I'm going to be living alone, and like Tim also mentioned, I didn't think about this when I was 35 or 40 even, because I was doing pretty well in terms of my physical health and well-being and mobility and things. As I have gotten older, I have realized that it is highly likely that in the very near future, I'm going to need more help than I have right now. And I need to start thinking about what I need that to look like, and how and what services and what avenues are going to be available to me to live as independently as I can, but getting the support that I'm going to need sooner probably rather than later. I mean, even just in the last couple of years, my mobility has declined significantly, and I've recognized it. I just recently, and most of you that know me, that met me at conferences a few years back, would probably, not know that I just recently transitioned to a full-time manual wheelchair. And that made me look at, where do I live? How accessible is it? How do I get the wheelchair in and out of my car? If, because I go to work, so I drive. So if I can't drive anymore, when that eventuality occurs, which it may very well, how am I going to get to work? What am I going to do? Right. So all of these things are spinning around in my head. And I think it's really our message to those of you that are out there is, please start thinking about those things before you're 59. And think about them when you're, younger, so that because, you can't create a future unless you can see it, right? So you want to be thinking about, where do I want to be? What do I want to be? And what do I want to be doing? And where do I want to be channeling my energy and my activity as I get older? Don't wait until you're in that situation before you start trying to create that reality. You have to create that reality now. And that's what I wanted to say.
I think that the most important thing that I want to know and to get out of what tonight is all about is the fact that your financial future doesn't start when you're about to retire. It starts much, much earlier than that. It starts hopefully with your parents saving money for your college education, or whatever you so choose to do after you turn 18 and finish high school. And hopefully that will set you up for success moving forward into your 20s and 30s and beyond, because it's not just going to happen overnight. It happens over time, and you also need to be prepared for changes to happen. It doesn't always stay static. It will sometimes fluctuate and change and be completely not what you expected, but you have to be ready to handle those types of situations when you are financially and physically independent, whether that means living on your own, living eventually in an assisted living facility for your daily activities of daily living assistance. That all takes money, and you need to prepare to have money left over from when you started to work. And that money can be used to help support you as you live out throughout your life and retire and hopefully sustain you until your end of life. And that is what's important tonight, is that people need to understand that, like Dr. Brei said and Julie, we as a population in our 20s and 30s need to remember and realize we are living much longer and living fuller and prosperous lives beyond what may have historically been initially thought. And we need to plan for that and be ready for whatever may come.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was a good way to get started now with Maria, so that I like how Julie put it, that Maria is going to touch on some of the particulars about financial planning. And certainly I know that Maria could talk about this for a really long time, but we don't have a ton of time. So we'll just do this for now. But we're going to share her contact information will be in the presentation, because surely you will have questions.
Yeah.
If not now, then later. So let me go ahead and change the slide. All right, so Maria, whenever you're ready, just tell me when you want me to change slides.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. And welcome. Thanks for inviting me, and welcome from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I'm speaking from. And I am the Director of Education and Outreach for Achieva Family Trust. And a few things, you can go to the next slide, about us. Just to let you know, the Family Trust, we're part of Achieva, which is a large organization in Pittsburgh that serves people with disabilities. We're one of the largest providers of services, and we really do, we always say birth to death services. You know, we serve little early intervention, employment, residential, and Achieva Family Trust is one of the divisions of Achieva. Next slide. But Achieva Family Trust, and I've been with the trust. By the way, speaking of, I think I am the oldest panelist tonight for sure. I may not have the gray hair, but good hair dye. But anyways, but Achieva Family Trust, I've been there since 1999, and it was established originally because of some changes to the Social Security legislation that created in 1993, actually, that created for or allowed for the creation of several types of special needs trusts that I'll talk about tonight, pooled trusts and payback trusts. And until 1998, in the state of Pennsylvania, the pooled trust in particular requires a nonprofit to be the trustee. And until we stepped up, until Achieva stepped up to say we are going to provide this service, there were no other organizations in Pennsylvania that offered a pooled trust for people with disabilities. And when I talk about the special needs trust and the importance of them for people with disabilities, you'll see how they really do and can make a real impact in the lives of individuals. And our board at the time felt it was very important to offer particularly, like I say, the pooled trust. But since our inceptions, we really have evolved over time, and we now serve as a corporate trustee for 3 types of special needs trusts that I'll be talking about tonight. And we do serve a wide variety of individuals with disabilities and their families. So, and we provide services, no-cost consultation to individuals and families. And we really serve as a resource to individuals that are trying to really think about planning for the future. And currently, we have over 2,500 beneficiaries in Pennsylvania and 12 other states with 175 million in assets. And those are from very small accounts to over $1 million in some of those accounts. So next slide. So tonight, I have to tell you this. I'm going to talk a little bit about, again, our future planning project. And the original sort of impetus for the project, which has been around since 2014, was really a survey of caregivers in southwestern Pennsylvania, and a survey that showed that for over 50% of the people that were surveyed who were caregivers, it demonstrated that they did not have a plan in place in the event that they were no longer able to care for the person with a disability for their family member. And that really spurred a request for proposals for organizations that would be willing to do education and outreach, primarily to caregivers. But again, the importance of this information not only applies actually to caregivers, but also to individuals such as those of you that might be on the that might be participating tonight, who are individuals with disabilities who are concerned about their future. And so tonight I'm going to talk again a little bit about how what are the options for caregivers in the way of special needs trusts, but also for individuals with disabilities. If you're working or thinking about the future, what are some options for you? And I'm going to go to the next slide. Again, when we think about the future, and when we talk to families and when we talk to individuals with disabilities, some of the questions that they ask, caregivers ask, is, again, what will happen if I'm suddenly unable to care for my family member? Where will my family member live, and who will look after my family member's finances? And individuals ask, how do I plan and protect for my financial future? And also, when should I start future planning? And again, I think I heard the previous speakers, all 3 of them reflect the fact that it's never too early to start thinking about your future and what you want it to look like, and think about what are the options. And the discussion, particularly some of the options that I'm going to talk about in the way of special needs trust enable, really have to do with really thinking through and planning for the possibility of needing some additional government assistance in the future. I think Julie had mentioned about needing more care and thinking about planning for that. And how do you think about your finances and how you might be able to support yourself in that situation, and also what's available through government resources, and how do you qualify for those resources if in fact you at some point are going to need those. So a lot of the focus in terms of our education and outreach is really focused on planning for the future in the way that you're really trying to protect assets, but also qualify for government benefits if you need them. Next slide. So when we talk to individuals and to families about thinking about the future, some of the things that we think are important to consider are the government benefits. Which government benefits might you need, or are you receiving now? Many people we talk to are already receiving government benefits, but to distinguish, there's a lot of confusion. People we talk to about what's the difference between supplemental SSI, supplemental security income, Ssdi, Medicaid, and Medicare, and it's important to understand their distinctions. And there'll be a slide, the next slide, that'll talk a little bit about that. But what government's benefits are you receiving now, or maybe are you likely to need in the future? What are the legal options? Do you have a last will and testament? Everyone should have a will. And it's an important legal instrument to be aware of that can help to, again, plan for the future, or think about, again, your assets and maybe where you would want them to pass through upon your passing. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit about special needs trust and the importance of those options for individuals with disabilities, and how they can really help to protect assets while enabling you to get the government benefits that you really need. And again, they're depending on whose funds we are talking about. There are 3 different types of special needs trusts, and again, I'll talk a little bit about that. Guardianship and power versus power of attorney. We talked a lot when we're doing discussions with families and individuals. Again, how do you get assistance with decision making? Most of the people that we talk with, individuals, the powers of attorney are just fine. They're able to make, to execute powers of attorney with individuals to help with like financial and healthcare. In other situations where individuals really aren't able to make or communicate decisions, sometimes guardianship is needed. But again, it's important to think about assistance with decision making. And that's part of, by the way, the normal process of estate planning for anyone, really. It's not just people with disabilities. So, and again, some of the future planning tools that we provide, you'll see on our website, there's a personal planning guide that we provide at free of charge that you can look at, that allows individuals to record information about the individual, that your individual likes, dislikes, that can be passed to a caregiver if in fact you're getting care currently from a parent maybe, or another caregiver. We'll talk a little bit about ABLE accounts, because that's another great option that is come on the scene since 2017 that does enable individuals with disabilities to save. And this is a really great saving tool for a number of situations, particularly for folks who are working, that really want to be able to protect, save for the future, but able to do it in a way that doesn't affect government benefits if they're receiving it. Next slide. I mentioned earlier government benefits. It is really important to understand that the distinction between the needs-based benefits and the other benefits that we describe as entitlements. And reason being, if an individual is on Social Security and, I'm sorry, SSI, Supplemental Security Income, Medicaid, or receiving perhaps a home and community-based waiver program, Medicaid waiver for their long-term care needs. Those needs-based benefits are assessed, the individual that applies for those benefits, it's based on an income and asset assessment. It's the financial as well as the disability that the person presents. You know, the disability, they're assessed in terms of their disability and whether it meets Social Security requirements, the definition. But in applying for SSI or Medicaid, there's also a financial eligibility assessment that's done that is going to be looking at your income and assets. And again, for individuals on SSI, you may know that in order to qualify for SSI, your total of assets aside from your home and your car cannot exceed $2,000. So that's a pretty restrictive kind of situation in terms of applying for those benefits. Medicaid also has income and asset restrictions depending on, again, your state, the type of Medicaid you're applying for, and Medicaid waivers likewise have limitations in income and assets. And why is that important? It's important because, again, if you are needing to qualify for those benefits, you need to be aware of what the restrictions are for those. And if you're receiving funds, if a parent or grandparent is wanting to leave you funds as part of their estate and you're receiving one of those benefits, then it may affect the benefit, your eligibility, if you receive funds in your name. And again, we'll talk a little bit about what are your options in that case. Entitlements, on the other hand, if you have been working, and probably many of you on the call are working, and you're paying into Social Security, then in the event that you are not able to work and you do meet the definition of disability according to Social Security, you are entitled to Social Security disability benefits based on your work history. And for Social Security disability or survivor benefits and Medicare, which is attached to Social Security disability after you've been receiving it for 2 years, there are no financial requirements for receiving those benefits unless you continue to work. And then, they do count earned income up to a certain point. So, but in general, when you apply for Social Security disability income, they're not going to ask you for your how much you have in the bank and your other sources of income unless you are actually working. So entitlements, again, are not necessarily affected by receiving funds, in an inheritance, for example, or you hit the lottery. Those are benefits that are based on your disability and the fact that you have paid in and have a work history. So again, it's important to understand those distinctions, because when you're thinking about what government benefits you want to protect, you want to know and understand what the rules are about eligibility for those various types. You want to go on to the next?
Yeah, Maria, just before we move on to the next slide, actually, there was a question that thought that Medicaid waiver was a waiver because it waived income requirements.
No, there are income limits for Medicaid waiver services. And again, these are state-run programs, first of all, so it's important to understand what your state, some of the requirements in your particular state for waiver. But no, there is an income and there's an asset limit too. If you're On Social Security disability, the asset limit is $8,000. If you're on SSI, it's still $2,000. So no, there are income and asset limits for waiver services, unfortunately. Okay, next slide. So some things to think about. Again, leaving assets directly to a disabled individual could disqualify them from receiving your government benefits. So if you are in need, you're receiving Medicaid and SSI, for example, and you suddenly get an inheritance from a parent who leaves you $10,000 directly in your name, potentially that could disqualify you from receiving your eligibility for your government benefits. Again, with Medicaid in particular, and also SSI, because again, remember, they're needs-based, and anytime you're receiving funds that exceed the income and asset limits, it can disqualify you. Sometimes, you know, we have people come to us and they'll say, well, you know, I'm getting $10,000 from my uncle that I didn't expect, but I'm just going to just refrain from accepting it. And if you're on any of those government benefits, that SSI or Medicaid, technically you cannot refuse to accept it. And if you do, if you would give it away or you know, refuse to accept it, and then Medicaid, you know, they can also make you ineligible for benefits for a certain period of time. So if you're receiving funds in your name, you know, you have to acknowledge that you are, and in fact accept it. You can't just disinherit it or not accept it. The other thing we see too, parents, you know, sometimes parents or grandparents, particularly parents, will say that they're not going to leave anything to their son or daughter with a disability because they don't want to interrupt benefits, and they're going to give it to another sibling to take care of, to hold those assets for the benefit of the sibling with a disability. And that you can do that, it's legal, but there's a problem because then those funds are technically the property of the non-disabled sibling. And if they are subject to divorce, or they die, or they are subject to some judgments, it can really, those funds are not protected for the person with disability. So we don't suggest that. It puts the money at risk, but we do hear sometimes families, you know, they do that in order to avoid, as I say, making their family member ineligible. Next slide. Again, the other thing to be aware of, and you hear this, I think, sometimes with people that are going into a nursing home where they have funds in their name and they think about transferring those assets to someone else to enable them to become eligible for, particularly for Medicaid. And, you know, we always want to make you aware that, you know, that there is a look back period for transfer of assets. So for SSI, it's 36 months. For Medicaid, it's 60 months. So when you go to apply for Medicaid, they're going to ask you what funds you had in your name. And again, they are going to be looking 5 years back to say, you know, money that was in your name. And if they see, you know, a large amount that was transferred, an amount it can make you ineligible for benefits. So asset transfers can be a real problem. Now, the question is, what can you do if you receive an inheritance, you have funds in your name, or in the future you need to apply for Medicaid and your assets are exceeding the limit? What options do you have? And that's where the options that we'll talk about as far as special needs trusts enable come into play. Again, remember, what we're trying to do is think about how you can protect assets but still qualify for government benefits. Next slide. again, as I mentioned, if a person's with a disability is on SSI or medical assistance or waiver, there are certain income resources and asset limits that apply. We mentioned that earlier. But there are options to protect the benefits. And the three types of special needs trusts, and I'll cover these very briefly tonight, are third-party trusts, which are generally used by parents or grandparents or a friend that wants to leave funds to their own funds to their son or daughter with a disability. But again, it's a type of trust that's used third-party funds. It's not, they are not the funds of the individuals with disabilities. The pooled and the payback trusts, which are in fact created through Social Security legislation, can contain the funds of the individual with disability. And I'll talk about a little more about when they're used. But those two types of trust are available for an individual for your funds if those funds are in your name and you need to shelter them in order to qualify for benefits. The other option that you have, with some limitations, and I'll talk about this, are the ABLE accounts, and it's achieving a better life experience. These are accounts that, as I say, were created more recently that are a great option for savings, particularly for people that are working, and that do protect the assets and enable you to receive benefits. And again, I'll talk about them in a minute. We'd always put up the paable.gov, and at the end, every state, I know that everyone on this call is not from Pennsylvania, and most of the other states have the ABLE accounts that are administered through their state agencies. And at the end of the slides, there'll be a reference to a site or that you can go on to research what your state, the agency in your state that provides ABLE accounts. Because again, they are accessible throughout the United States. Next slide. Next slide. Hello, did I lose you? Oh.
Sorry, I was just trying to mute myself. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the button to unmute myself. But there's a question slash comment. Going back to waivers from Ramu in Georgia, who was saying that he thought the Katie Beckett waiver looks at the child with the disabilities income rather than the parents of the child. And he says, I'm not sure how Medicaid waivers for adults with disabilities work.
Okay, well, yes, thanks for that question. For children with disabilities, and I was really speaking for adults, the criteria for children is different. Actually, in Pennsylvania, a child with a disability, and I only speak for Pennsylvania, I know all the different states are not the same, but I know that children in Pennsylvania with a disability can qualify for Medicaid irregardless of the parents' income or assets, and they can receive, a Medicaid waiver for their medical needs. So the criteria is different for children than for adults, but adults do have, and I apologize, I don't have the exact for the waiver. It's a little over, it's $2,000, I think it's about $2,300 is the income limit for Medicaid waivers for adults. But yes, children are different. And you have to look to your state, to see what their criteria, because as I say, I think in Pennsylvania we have the loophole, which not all states do.
And there's, I know we said we would take questions at the end, but I feel like these are appropriately timed questions for the topic right now. There was another question about ABLE accounts. What happens if you move to another state after opening the account?
Okay. And again, you are able, and I'll talk about ABLE in a little bit, but yes, you are able to keep the account. It's my understanding you can keep the account where you are, where you've established your original ABLE account, or I think you have the option of transferring if you wish to the state where you're moving to. But the state agencies, I'll tell you, our agency, the ABLE accounts in Pennsylvania, it's administered through the Treasury Department in the state of Pennsylvania. They are quite helpful in terms of access in an 800 number, and they really will walk you through things. But it's my understanding, again, you don't have to transfer the account when you move, unless you want to. Okay. All right. And again, I'll just briefly say, again, everyone needs a will. And again, many times our discussion is with caregivers, just to make sure that they are aware that they should have a will, but everyone needs a will. And again, remember what the will does is it specifies what will be done with your assets upon your death. And if you, when we also say, and this goes for individuals with disabilities as well as caregivers or parents, a will shouldn't be a do-it-yourself endeavor, especially if you have special needs planning involved. You should really go to an attorney that has some expertise in this area, that understands government benefits and has some knowledge to really make sure that you're planning properly. On our website, we do have a list of lawyers. We give out a list of lawyers that we've worked with that we know have this kind of expertise. In every state, if you go on the Special Needs Alliance website, they have a list of attorneys nationally. I mean, there are elder law attorneys. That's really what you want to be looking for, is elder law attorneys, because generally they have also special needs planning experience. But most every state has lawyers that have this kind of expertise. But as I say, we give out a list of attorneys in our area, in the state of Pennsylvania, but also some surrounding states that have this kind of expertise.
Maria, can I make a statement quickly?
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you because this is important.
Yep.
And what you do is important. But I really want to emphasize that a standard estate attorney or trust attorney is not going to be necessarily understanding what is necessary for people with disabilities.
Right. Well, yes, and that's where the special needs planning comes into play. And that's what I was saying, the Special Needs Alliance. And the other thing that you can do, if there's someone out there that is really needing an attorney, at the end, my contact information is on the last slide. Just call us, because again, if there's, generally we're in contact with a wide network, and if we don't know the answer, we'll get it for you. If there's someone in your area that we can put you in touch with that has this kind of expertise, because it is very important to go to a knowledgeable attorney. We think, that's key. Again, just to let you know, if you die without a will, your assets are distributed to your heirs in accordance with the applicable state law. So the idea with the will is that you want to make your wishes known and have those carried out upon your death. So anyways, all right, next slide. Next slide. So what are special needs trusts? And again, special needs trusts are designed for individuals who are disabled, and it can be physically or mentally. I mean, as I say, in the trust, we serve a wide variety of individuals with disabilities. The whole idea of a special needs trust is that it's really to be used for supplemental or extra care above and beyond what the government provides. I always think of government benefits as sort of the basics. It's housing, food, and the basics, shelter for living. Really to recognize, to live a good life. I mean, the idea is that the other things that make life, enhance quality of life, are the things that a special needs trust is really designed to provide for. And again, it can be things like, clothing, taking a vacation. Maybe it's medical needs above and beyond what your insurance provides. It's, you know, getting that special consultation. Maybe it's special equipment for adaptation, transportation, recreation, entertainment, the things that really are life enhancing that perhaps aren't available through basic government benefits. That's the idea of a special needs trust. It's to supplement quality of life and supplement what the government provides. Now, the next sentence talks about supplanting, can't be used for housing, food, utilities, or cash access. Now, we always have to say this because, I mean, basically, if you're administering a special needs trust as a trustee, you have to be aware of what government benefits the person's receiving. And in fact, if somebody's receiving supplemental security income, particularly, and the trust is paying for their housing or their food or utilities or giving them cash every month, it can reduce the SSI benefit. They are considered, you know, supplement or supplanting what SSI is meant to be. So you don't want to reduce benefits by using the trust funds. However, you know, there are times that we do pay for housing and food for people that are, for example, receiving Social Security disability. They are entitlement programs. They are not affected by those payments. So again, it depends on the individual situation. But we can, from, you know, special needs trusts can purchase homes and do accessibility renovations. We, you know, depending on, again, the size of the trust, I mean, we have definitely made home purchases, particularly making a home more accessible for an individual with a disability. Sometimes it's a child in the trust that is, you know, a total care and needing, you know, more accessible home. So we can do that. Again, depending on the trust, the size of the trust. Next slide, please. So again, the types of trusts, there's the third party, which I mentioned earlier. It's also known as a common law trust. Again, primarily used by parents, grandparents, friends that want to leave funds for their family member. And then the payback and pooled, which are the two types of trusts that are created through federal law that in fact can be used for funds of the individual. So if you are working or you, as an individual with disability, have received funds, you need to shelter those funds. Payback and pooled trusts are the two types of trusts. What is a trustee? Again, I always, you know, mention the fact that sometimes there's confusion about what a trustee does. Think of it this way. The trustee is really just the individual or the corporate trustee. It can be an individual or corporate entity that has oversight over the assets that are in that trust. And that's it. I mean, they do not, beyond the trust funds, that really is their particular oversight. They're not rep payees for Social Security. They're not guardians or power of attorney. Generally, a trustee is just specifically to administer the funds that are within the trust. And again, you can have more than one trustee except for the pooled trust. And so the idea with the special needs trust is the resources in the trust are not considered available and they do not count against eligibility standards. So it allows an individual to have above the $2,000 limit or the $8,000 waiver limit and still qualify for those benefits if they are in need of those. Next slide. So again, those of you that might be living with a parent or grandparent or a caregiver that you're concerned about receiving funds from their estate, or maybe they're concerned about how to provide for you upon their passing, the third-party trust is the option that is available for them. Remember, it contains the funds of a third party, family or friends. And it's a type of trust that's governed state by state, by the way. It's case law in the various states, but all states have some form of a third party trust. But that's where an attorney within the state of the jurisdiction would be important to have that trust drafted in the state where you're living so that it's valid. But the friends or family can fund the third-party trust. They can do it during their lifetime or through their estate plans. Most of the time what we see is a parent will come in and they'll draft a trust that will be funded upon their death or the death of both parents. It's called a testamentary trust. But sometimes they do, there's reasons they fund it during their life, but most of the time it's testamentary. The nice thing about the third-party trust, it can be very flexible, and also during the lifetime of the beneficiary. And it can be used for a variety of things, again, for quality of life. But the good thing is upon the death of the beneficiary, whoever drafted the trust, so if it's a parent, he can say where the funds will go if the beneficiary passes away. So it can go to other family members, it can go to friends, it can go to charity, wherever the grantor, whoever created the trust, they can say where they want the funds to go. And when I talk about these other two types of trust, you'll see there's not that flexibility in the in the payback or pooled trust. But the third party, the other thing is there's no payback to the state Medicaid agency. If you've been receiving funds as a beneficiary, there's no payback and no age limit. So again, you'll see in the other two types of trust, there are age restrictions. So we've had some parents who die and maybe they're in their 90s and their family member is over 65. The age does not affect it. They can still create the trust without age restrictions. Once again, there are age restrictions on the other two types of trust. I'm going to go to the next. And this is, and I realize too, by the way, this is a lot of material to kind of cover in a very short period of time, but that's why we'll have these slides for you, and also again be able to answer some questions. The payback and pooled trusts, those are what are considered self-funded trusts. What it means is if you as an individual are eligible for receiving funds in your name, and again, payback trusts in particular are used many times if an individual is subject to a personal injury settlement or maybe a malpractice settlement, and maybe it's a substantial settlement, but the individual is really needing, because of their injuries or their impairments, are really needing a lot of care and are receiving that care through Medicaid. Then many times the attorney who's maybe gotten that settlement will establish a payback trust and it can be established by the individual with the disability, their parent, grandparent, legal guardian, or the court. Again, the individual has to be disabled as defined, and that's the Social Security definition, where you find it in their regs. But it has to be an individual under 65. It can be an individual or a corporate trustee, and it has to be drafted by an attorney and approved by the Department of Human Services. And that's, again, that the rules in Pennsylvania, but I think it's pretty similar in other states where whatever entity your Department of Human Services at the state level would have to approve the trust in order for you to receive benefits. The thing about the payback trust, during your lifetime, it's used just like any other special needs trust to enhance quality of life. It can be used to purchase a house, purchase a car. I mean, if funds are available in the trust. But upon the individual's death, then the state will present a bill, and the state must be paid back for those benefits if you've been receiving the benefits during your lifetime. And Now, in a payback trust, sometimes if there's a very large amount and you haven't been receiving services for that long, once the state is paid back, then the rest of the funds can go to family or friends or to a charity. But it just depends on the individual situation, particularly if you've been receiving waiver funds where there's been lots of services. The price tag can be quite substantial upon the person's death. But again, every individual and every situation is different. And again, the good thing about a payback trust, once again, during the person's lifetime, that money really can be used to enhance quality of life. It's just that upon their death. And just so you know, as a corporate trustee, I mean, we're not obligated to save the funds for the state to be paid back. It's our obligation to use those funds according to the person's need during their lifetime. If there's nothing left at the end, that's okay. I mean, the state will not get paid, but then we have to justify, of course, how we use the funds. But basically, it is a good option if you're receiving those funds and that potentially your benefits could be disqualified. But again, we see the payback trust generally for large amounts because it costs upfront costs to establish the trust. You have to go to an attorney that drafts the trust and so forth. So next slide. So the pooled trust. Before ABLE accounts came on the scene, a lot of individuals used the pooled trust as a mechanism for savings and protecting assets. The pooled trust I had mentioned earlier was created through federal law. And it is an option that requires that the trustee be a nonprofit organization. It can be established by an individual with a disability, their parent, grandparent, same legal guardian of the court, and the individual does have to be disabled as defined. And generally, the individual should be under the age of 65, although the federal law doesn't specify that. But state Medicaid law, we find, like in Pennsylvania, if you do establish a pooled trust and you're over 65, Medicaid will penalize you. But anyways, generally, we say you should be under 65. The good thing about a pooled trust, unlike the payback trust, again, we see it used for small amounts of money, smaller amounts, because we use a standard form joinder agreement. You don't have to go to an attorney to get a trust drafted, because we have a master trust agreement that's already approved through the state Medicaid agency and through Social Security. They've accepted our joint, what they call master trust and joinder. So in order to establish the trust, all that you must do is fill out and sign a joinder agreement, and with a check you can establish that that trust. From the beginning of the family trust, we've always felt that we wanted to make these trusts accessible to everyone, and so we will start a trust for really as low as $500, and even in some situations less than that. And we use the pooled trust for those smaller amounts of money because, again, there's no cost, there's no setup cost to establish it. You don't have to go to an attorney, and you can do it in a very quick fashion, because sometimes an individual will receive funds in their name, and maybe it's a back payment from Social Security, and they have a certain amount of time to spend that down, and they need to, maybe they're getting to the end where they need in the next 30 days to establish that trust. So we can usually do a pooled trust within a day or two. And again, the idea of a pooled trust is that the funds are pooled for investment but accounted for individually. And all of our funds are pooled for investment purposes. What we try to do is, for the smaller amounts, use the benefit of having those larger, connected to the larger investment accounts to earn, use the market to earn additional funds on those pooled accounts. Now, again, with the pooled trust, though, again, unlike that third-party trust where funds can go wherever at the person's death, in a pooled trust, at the beneficiary's death, for any funds that are not paid back to the state, the nonprofit can retain those funds. And in our trust, in the family trust, we have established a charitable residual grant program that we give funds, grants to individuals with disabilities across the state of Pennsylvania for things like camps and home adaptations and a variety of other things. We've given over $4 million away out of that account. Not all pooled trusts have a charitable residual fund, grant fund. In other states, many of those pooled trusts, they pay back the state. Some of those pooled trusts will also distribute money to family once the state's paid back. So it can vary. But in our trust, that's how we use the retention of funds. So again, if you're a family member, you don't necessarily want to use a payback or pooled trust if you don't have to because of the restrictions. But if you're an individual with a disability and you're really facing becoming ineligible for benefits if you're receiving funds in your name, or you're planning for the future where perhaps you're needing to apply for Medicaid and you have excess assets, then the options of the payback and pooled trust are available to you to plan for a time when you might need Medicaid eligibility. So it's important to know about them as an option. And again, every individual situation is different. And that's why, again, we do individual consultations just to figure out, what applies, what makes sense. So, next slide. Again, one of the myths, because we talk to a lot of individuals who, I think when people hear special needs trust, they really think that you have to really be rich to have a trust. And it's true, a lot of corporate trustees like banks do require high minimums to establish a trust, a special needs trust, to serve as a trustee. But as I mentioned earlier, we will start a trust for as low as $500. And again, in some pooled trust situations, lower than that, just to enable the person to have the trust. So, and I didn't mention, in our trust as a corporate trustee, and this would be any corporate trustee, there will be fees, to administer the trust, and it just depends on how much is in that trust. For us, there's no startup fees or anything, but once we actually are administering the trust, then there are fees to administer. If you have an individual as a trustee, like a family member, that you don't necessarily have those fees, but again, as an individual with special needs trust, you kind of have to know what you're doing and also understand how to distribute those funds so that you don't interrupt the person's benefits. So it can be somewhat, complicated, plus tax and, some of the other things you need to know as an individual. But again, that's why we're there. If families or individuals need us as a corporate trustee, we want to try to make it accessible. Just reiterate again, making sure that if you're going to seek an attorney to help with estate planning, make sure it's someone who's knowledgeable about drafting special needs trusts and also government benefits. Very important. Next slide. So the ABLE Act. Mentioned earlier, and again, I mentioned that the pooled trust, historically, before ABLE accounts came on the scene, a number of individuals would use a pooled trust in order to shelter small amounts of money. Well, now, with the ABLE Act that was signed in 2014, it is a new provision under 529 of the IRS code, for many families that have historically done savings for educational costs for their kids. They've used now 529 accounts for educational purposes. And I think families of individuals with disabilities are saying, well, I can save for my kid without a disability and, for college and for their education. But my child with a disability, if I save, then I potentially disqualify them for their benefits for Medicaid or SSI. So the provisions that were created under this law enable individuals with disabilities to save funds in their name, just like a traditional 529, and the funds that go into an ABLE account are not counted against the person for eligibility for their government benefits. And again, in the state of Pennsylvania, it's administered through the Department of Treasury. We don't have anything to do with ABLE accounts other than we always advise about it, make sure people know about it and how to get in touch with the state agency to establish one. And sometimes when people call us, we'll say, well, an ABLE account is, will just serve you well. You don't need a pooled trust, or you don't need a special needs trust. Next slide, please. So again, the ABLE account just need to be aware of there are some restrictions with ABLE accounts also, in the sense of, now the beneficiary is the account owner, but there can be authorized signers to be added to the account. So sometimes there's situations where families will say, well, I don't think the individual's really able to manage their own account. So families can, and a parent could set up an ABLE account for a family member. But again, the beneficiary is the account owner. Unlike a trust, remember the pooled trust, the trustee is going to be administering those funds. So it's for the benefit of the beneficiary, but you don't own the account. It's for your benefit. But in an ABLE account, you own the account. The beneficiary in an ABLE account has to be disabled, and the onset of that disability has to be before the age of 26. Now, you don't have to be on Social Security or SSI. You can self-identify or have a doctor to indicate that you have a disability, but it is important that the disability occurred before the age of 26. They're trying to change that to increase the age to 46, but at this point it's still 26. And contributions are limited to $15,000 a year from all sources. So if people want to contribute to it, at all sources is $15,000 a year, unless the person is working. And then if you are working, you can contribute $12,490. Now that was the 2021 amount. It's going to go up next year. It'll be $16,000, by the way, next year from all sources, and the working amount is going to be slightly above that $12,000. So you can add again. So if you're working, you can have the $15,000 plus the additional $12,000 above that each year that you're working. And still, and it's still, acceptable in an ABLE account. And if you're on SSI, you can save up to $100,000 without losing your SSI cash benefit. Now, you don't lose your Medicaid. They'll just suspend the SSI until your ABLE account goes under the $100,000. But again, the Medicaid, you don't lose Medicaid if you are in the ABLE account. And remainder funds. Now, this is in Pennsylvania, and again, this is different in the varying states. In the state of Pennsylvania, under the federal law, it says that the state is able to collect anything that's left over in the ABLE account. So it goes back to the state. But the state of Pennsylvania chose to waive that. So for the moment, funds that in the state of Pennsylvania, remainder funds can be transferred to a disabled sibling, or they're just left in the beneficiary's estate. Again, that may change over time. We don't know. At this point, it's still in the state of Pennsylvania. It doesn't go back to the state. And if you are applying within your state for an ABLE, you want to understand what happens to remainder funds, because it may be different than that. Next slide, please. Oh, so again, just some future planning options that we provide. Again, there's a wealth of information that we provide, like in our monthly newsletter. Anyone who is interested in receiving our monthly newsletter, you can just maybe let Juanita know your email, and we can add you. We do a monthly speaker series. Actually, it's a speaker series during the spring and fall. But those speaker series, we do a variety of topics. There's a lot more detail about special needs trust, ABLE accounts, Medicaid, Medicare, and those speaker series are all recorded, and you can go back and listen to those. There's also, I mentioned about the ABLE, the National Resource Center for ABLE, to select your particular state. It'll tell you where to go in your state. There's also, I mentioned here that the SSI.gov, there's that website also within your state. Like, we provide also employment benefits counseling. Individuals who want to work, concerned about losing their government benefits, we provide a service. But each state, Social Security has a program for people working that it does provide employment benefits counseling. So that's just a site you can go to. And the National Disability Institute does a lot on that website around financial empowerment for people with disabilities. So just some resources for you. A lot to cover. I know I went over my time, but there's just, and again, I would, if you want to go to the next slide, and maybe the next with my contact information. So I would also say, if you have questions or you want to reach out by phone, we're happy to, talk with you, to discuss your particular situation, to hopefully point you in the right direction. We do a lot of, referrals to resources. And again, if you're in another state, we usually have a network we can put you in touch with. As I say, there's a lot to know, but remember, what we talked about tonight is really, if you are concerned about protecting government benefits, but also protecting your assets, these are some options you need to think about. So hopefully it was help. Any questions? Do we have any questions?
Maria, this is Tim.
Sure.
So I apologize that I'm not using the chat.
That's okay.
But this has been really extraordinarily helpful. Even for me, where I'm dealing with families and children and adolescents.
Yeah.
So I thank you very much for this. I think that one of the things that I have become confused about, or was confused about, was SSI versus SSDI.
Yes.
So the whole issue of acronyms.
Yes. Yes.
So this was really helpful to me to understand that SSI and SSDI are totally different and refer to different programs entirely. So, well, but I also love the ABLE account information today.
Yeah, well, and I took out some of the slides around government benefits. Could be a whole 2 hours. We really, in fact, some of our webinars are really good to go back and look at, because they're pretty much in depth about those benefits. Because it is very confusing. People call us and say, well, I'm on Social Security. Well, what kind of Social Security? Is it SSI? And it is important to understand, which of those two, because it helps in the planning process.
Right.
You want to know what the rules are.
So Maria, with this speaker series that you referenced, would that be one place where one could hear the more in-depth government benefits?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. If you go to the Achieve a Family Trust, to our website, and under resources, there'll be a drop down, and you can see like our speaker series. And we did again, government benefits, special needs trust, able accounts. We've done like 2 hours on government benefits, just on Medicaid or, Social Security. And it's really great. We have a number of contacts like with Social Security and through PA Health Law that do our speaker series, quite, really great experts in these areas. And guardianship, power of attorney, that's another whole area. We have a 2-hour series on that. We're going to be doing one more on supported decision making, because that seems to be, of interest to a lot of individuals,
So basically, Maria, you're saying this was our survey course. And
And,
there's a chapter on each one of the topics.
This was a paragraph or a subheading.
And I do have to say, a lot of our orientation in these presentations have really been to caregivers, because again, our original sort of reason to be was to make sure parents and people know how to plan, but it doesn't mean that it is not applicable to individuals with disabilities need to know this information also, but it's a little different approach.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you.
I think so. I'm sorry I interrupted somebody, but I think this is really important, because often for those of us who are adults, right, it's helping to gear our parents into helping us think about this and what options they have. It's not necessarily totally led by the parents.
Yes.
But I think as we get older, and for people who are in their 20s and 30s, it's saying, let's investigate this, because I expect to live a full life, and let's figure out what we can do.
Right.
And I some of the information, Maria, was information that, and I've looked into a lot of this, right? It never dawned on me that the strategy of putting everything in my brother's name could be problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now I have to go back to my family and say, hey, we should discuss this.
Right. No, because again, it's legal, but the issue is, it puts those funds in your sibling's name, and it's their money. It's not protected. So, yeah. I'm glad that, again, it gets you thinking about some of these things.
So let's do
Maria,
more of these
I
next year.
went ahead. Ooh, sorry, Juanita.
No, that was me. I just said, let's do more of these next year with more
Yeah.
information.
Okay. I was going to say, Maria, I put in the links to the various sources and such from the AFT website,
Great. Thank you.
since I know how to navigate that pretty well.
All right. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, you definitely can't plan for your whole life in 1 hour.
Yeah.
So, this is really, really good. And just, we're so grateful, Maria, for all this information. And I think this is the kind of thing that maybe we've heard of, maybe we've heard elements of this before, but we need to hear it again and,
Yes.
repeat it and see it written down. So with that in mind,
And I think able accounts is really new to many people. So I really think that this information is incredibly important for our population.
And there's a lot to know also. I with able accounts, I didn't mention, the use of the able accounts are pretty broad too. It's supposed to be disability related, but they're really, again, it's a really nice option in terms of, there's a pretty broad use of the funds in those accounts. And you have a direct access to it, through, because it's a more direct access. So we really recommend them a lot, but again, I'd encourage people to, if they're in another state, to talk to their state agency about how it works. And most of the time they're pretty good about walking you through it.
Since you mentioned that, I'm just going to go quickly back here. I think you mentioned, and I think, and if you wanted to look for your own in your state, the trick would be going over here to the ABLE National Resource Center.
Yes.
The website, ablenrc.org. select a state, or if you don't remember that, then go to the National Resource Center of the
Yes.
Spina Bifida Association, and I will look this for you. And I will send it to you.
Great.
But yeah, but there's a lot of information out there. So, you know, and this presentation will be up on our website, and it will also be, you can view it again, listen to it again. It'll be on our YouTube channel and on our website. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to call us, or to email us, or call us. But here's our email address, or I'm Juanita, and also Judy with SBA. So if nobody has any more questions or things that they'd like to share, I just want to, say thanks again for joining us. Yes, thank you so much, Maria, Tim, Libby, Julie, and everyone who asked questions. And we'll do something like this again in 2022.
Okay.
Thanks for attending, everybody.
Very
Thank
much.
you.
Happy holidays.
Thank
to
you.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I just wanted to say thanks, Maria, and just point out that, like, got us thinking as an adult with a disability, we might have children with disabilities. So this is
Sure.
something to think about, right? Like, so,
Yes, absolutely.
For
Absolutely.
sure. For sure.
Great.
Important stuff. Important stuff.
Well, thank you.
Hard stuff, but important. So, all right,
Thank-
everybody. Thank you so much. Have a
Thanks,
good
y'all.
night or good afternoon, wherever you might be. Christine, have a
Okay.
Thank
good
you.
morning, practically. Or
Bye.
all
Care.
right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.